Everywhere I went for these research projects on women in our precariat, from the slums of Ahmedabad to the forests of Jharkhand to the villages of Uttar Pradesh, as you see in the book. Everywhere I met these women, much like me, who were absolutely in love with Shah Rukh Khan. I used to go every year for the big birthday celebration. I think he just changed the way celebrity culture worked in India. Network wealth, right? In an industry that is considered to be a very insider club industry. First post-liberalization superstar. So firstly, I have very little patience for people who don't like him very much. So I'm tremendously biased. We were the first generation of women who claimed Mr. Khan because he was our superstar. He came on to the scene when I was a teenager. So I always say he's a female icon, but not a feminist icon. They always say you should never meet your heroes, but I've been saying if your hero Shah Rukh Khan, you must meet him.
Hello and welcome to News 18 Showsha. I'm Shreeja Bhattacharya, and today I'm joined by the uber-talented Shrayana Bhattacharya, who's an economist and has also authored Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh. So glad to have you here, Shrayana, and many congratulations on the fact that your book will be completing a year of its publication this very month, actually. Sorry. So, before we move into any other further questions, when and how did you think that you could use Shah Rukh as a parameter to analyze the lives of Indian women?
Shreeja, if somebody had said to me 15 years ago, because this book is based on 15 years of research, that I would write a story about women in the Indian economy through the lens of Shah Rukh Khan, I'd roll my eyes and say, get out of here. That's impossible. But turns out that's precisely what I did. What happened was in 2006, I was in my early 20s. I was sent to a low-income neighborhood in Ahmedabad called Bapu Nagar, where we were doing surveys on women who were, they're part of the precariat, making incense sticks, agarbattis, and garment work at home, earning about a quarter of minimum wage, Shreeja. And my job was to take a very typical economist questionnaire and ask people about their wages, working conditions. This was research as part of a large consortium of advocacy for women in the informal economy led by Seva. And when I showed up, all these women looked incredibly bored when I started asking them these questions, because they told me they'd met girls like me with their kajal in their eyes and khadi kurtas. Mm-hmm. And I realized I needed to do something different. So in research, they teach you to use icebreakers, right? So I started asking all these women who their favorite actor was. And lo and behold, everywhere I went for these research projects on women in our precariat, from the slums of Ahmedabad to the forests of Jharkhand to the villages of Uttar Pradesh, as you see in the book, everywhere I met these women, much like me, who were absolutely in love with Shah Rukh Khan. And I realized once I started to ask these women about why they liked Mr. Khan, or how they watched him, or how they interacted with his iconography, suddenly these were really powerful stories about the economy, because all these women started telling me about how they didn't have enough time. So as we know, women are time poor in India. I describe the time poverty of women. They don't have enough time for leisure or fun. They didn't have independent income or purchasing power to just watch their favorite actor. And I realized, as I decided to just continue following a subset of these women for more than a decade, that actually was a very beautiful way for women to talk about men, money, markets, marriage, without it being this very traditional, stuffy social science approach. And so the book is what it is. It's very much a book of economics, as I think you mentioned, but Mr. Khan is my research method.
It's been so many years since Shah Rukh stepped into the limelight. What do you think really works for him? He's some major releases next year. So ahead of that, What do you think?
Oh, I can tell you that almost everyone I have interviewed, and I've interviewed so many of his fans. I mean, the ones featured in the book, but also just fans who show up outside Mannat. I used to go every year for the big birthday celebration. I describe this at the end of the book, because I was curious about, who's standing outside, why are they standing outside? And they're actually very beautiful, compelling stories, because many of the people standing there aren't particularly well off. It costs money to be there. And yet they love this actor so much. And I can tell you all of them are obsessed with the idea of what's coming in 2023. And I'm super excited. I've been watching the teasers. I mean, as for what works for him, I think there's so much that's been said about his icon. I feel, in fact, and I say this in the book, he is the best person who tells the story about his icon. I mean, he's just one of our most, articulate celebrities. I think he just changed the way celebrity culture worked in India. But one of the things that really I pick up in the book is that, particularly for women, given we're such a deeply patriarchal society where so many women constantly feel second guessed about their ambitions, about how loved they are, women are constantly told that you need to behave in a certain way, toe a patriarchal line, right? Be a good woman, then you'll be loved, right? You need to jump through all these social hoops to earn love. As I describe in the book, men earn money and women earn love. That's sort of the division of labor in our society. And so when they see this actor whose icon is nothing but love, the wide open arms, it's actually a strangely deep psychological relief for a lot of women who are dealing with a lot of constraints, in their access to public space, feeling unsafe, this kind of surveillance on women's bodies. And I think he's released from that. So I think the love in the iconography that he represents, that really seems to connect to women who feel very unloved and insecure in their everyday lives. And I describe this in the book that as real life disappoints, his icon just grows larger and larger. So I think that's something that's really important. And the other thing is he very much represents a story about the economy and social mobility. I mean, you see this in the book. So many of the women and men will say to me that, he made it without network wealth, right? In an industry that is considered to be a very insider club industry. And he very much represents the story of India's economic boom, right? He's our first post-liberalization superstar. As consumers markets and satellite television started to grow, he very much embodies that big shift. So I think it's love and the economy. I think those two reasons I sense is, at least based on my conversations, why he really resonates with so many people.
Right. And while you've spoken about the fans, I'm sure in the 15 years of your research work, you've come across people who don't really appreciate him that much. So, what are their opinions like, and what are their complaints?
So firstly, I have very little patience for people who don't like him very much. So I'm tremendously biased, as I'm very transparent about in the
You
book.
and me both.
But of course, yeah, I'm so happy you said that, Shreeja. But I'll tell you what, and you see this in, the chapters of many of the sort of low income women and middle class women, and even in fact the elite upper caste women in the book, which is that wherever there's a Shah Rukh fan, typically there's a father, brother, mother who's feeling a bit uncomfortable about why this young girl is so obsessed with this actor. And I think part of it is many men I interacted with would say, he really does deviate from a very stoic masculine trope, right? He's not an Amitabh Bachchan. There's a very different masculinity that existed in the past. And I think he really broke the mold. Anupama Chopra, the wonderful film critic, who was interviewed in my book, said to me, it's the first time we'd ever seen an actor race a helicopter and yet, cut vegetables in the kitchen. And I think it's a very different masculinity, which some women, a lot of women seem to find deeply appealing. And yet there are some men in particular, I notice, who are perhaps socialized in believing in this very stoic, very traditional masculinity, who might sort of have very different views. And then you have the usual, the more westernized elites who will say, well, it's a silly Bollywood film. And, one of the hopes I have, Shreeja, is that I think even for people who dismiss Hindi cinema and popular culture, I think you realize what a strong role it plays as language, as release, right? As fun and joy in the lives of people whose lives are so harsh every day. And I hope that people who even dismiss Mr. Khan's icon for being soppy and excessively romantic and whatever realm they want to sort of come from, they read the book and they realize that actually it's playing a very important emotional function for a lot of women out there.
Absolutely. I hope so too. And since we're at it, I really have to ask you, when did your tryst with Shah Rukh really begin? How far do you go?
Oof. I'm a very typical urban Indian fan, which is, I think, I describe myself as, I'm born in the early 1980s. We were the first generation of women who claimed Mr. Khan because he was our superstar. He came on to the scene when I was a teenager, and I watched him in Bazigar, which probably is the worst film of his to start with, because he's actively harming women and stalking them, and there's all kinds of terrible gender behavior going on, which one has to sort of acknowledge. And I think this connects back to your previous question about what some people say when they don't like him. I think many people obviously talk about some of the gender scripts in his films. And I'd encourage people to just read the book to see how different women sort of see those scripts somewhat differently. It's interesting. So I always say he's a female icon, but not a feminist icon, precisely because of this, right? So watching those films at a very young age may not have been the best idea, but I think it was around then. But I must confess, Shreeja, and I think this is this is where I'm very typical. So many English-speaking fans would tell me they love him because of his interviews, and I'm no different. He was one of the first superstars who came onto the scene and was so accessible to us through so many interviews. And again, it goes back to economic reform, because he came on at a time when suddenly satellite televisions, because of changes in regulation, just started to proliferate, right? Channels like yours, and what that meant was that I could come back home, switch on the TV, and they wouldn't be necessarily showing a song of his, but an interview of his. And he felt very intimate to us because he would talk about his economic struggles, his personal struggles, his own anxieties. He just opened up, and he had such a wonderful facility with interacting with the media, right? And so to me, actually, I actually do think that the tryst with him, really, I think my fandom very much started not only with the films, but with all those interactions that one saw, right? Like old interviews with Simi Grewal and various others. So there's that. But I think through the 15 years of the research, my fandom for him has been burnished in a way because of the way I've seen other women who are very different from me, Shreeja, don't come from my privilege, come from very different backgrounds, seeing the way they interact with him and they see him, right? And what he means to them. I think my love for him and my appreciation for him has just grown so much more, just through the process of the research as well.
You also met him this year.
Yes.
How did that
Yes.
pan out?
It was wonderful. I have to thank his manager, Pooja Dadlani. She, it's very much thanks to her that was architected. And it really felt like the book had reached its sort of, one of its target readers, because I always joke that the book is a love letter to all women who are trying to hold on to a paid job just so that they can earn income to just have a good time on their own without relying on others. And it's also a love letter to Shah Rukh Khan. So it felt really special that at least that love letter to him had reached him. So it was wonderful. And he's they always say you should never meet your heroes, but I've been saying if your hero Shah Rukh Khan, you must meet him. So I think
Amen to that.
I'm very grateful to him. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. So, you've constantly, over time and again, you've spoken about how Shah Rukh has really ruined the romantic feelings that a woman should have, basically, and how he redefined masculinity. So can we talk a little about that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a wonderful story. It was in the news, I think, a few years ago, about a young woman who said that Shah Rukh had romantically ruined her because she felt like she always wanted a certain kind of very Yash Raj films, like a Karan Johar film proposal. And what's fascinating about that, though, is eventually she proposed to her boyfriend. I mean, this is, the story is, I think, out there for anyone to see. And she adopted the role of Shah Rukh, and she serenaded her partner and proposed marriage to him or whatever else. And so it's interesting that I think while a lot of these young women have seen him, and he's really changed the way the trope of the male hero, right? What he looks like and how he behaves. What's fascinating is I always say this in the book, so many of these women, they don't want to marry Shah Rukh. They want to be him. They want his confidence, his economic gumption. They want to be able to love as unabashedly as his characters do, right? And I think that's very interesting, as I saw that through the book. But the other reason I think he seems to have really impacted everyone's romantic expectations, at least the elite, the women and middle-class women I speak to. I do think women from the precariat engage with his iconography very differently. But for the elite and middle class women, I think it's very much the fact that this was a man in his films who was constantly listening to women. So I would constantly hear from women that, have you seen how he talks to the mother and the girlfriend? There's a way, and there's a way those characters engage with women's feelings. They acknowledge women's feelings, they engage with their needs. The fact that, I measured, for example, and it's there in the book, how much women speak in his films relative to women speaking in other big hits of Hindi cinema with other actors. And unsurprisingly, statistically speaking as well, women just speak much more. So his films have more space for women's words, their feelings. And I think as a consequence, so many young women saw that imagery and thought, I deserve that, right? Like I deserve a man who will take my needs and my need to rest, my need to express myself much more seriously. And I think that's, it sort of elevated a certain kind of expectation. And I think that imprint that he has on so many of our romantic lives is actually pretty indelible, right? Just that expectation of equality and reciprocity. Because while he's stalking women in one part of his iconography, there's also another part of his iconography where, he's a therapist to a young woman in Dear Zindagi. I mean, the ways in which his characters engage with women's issues and their feelings is really quite poignant. And I think so many women really connected with that. And then, of course, the interviews, as I mentioned, I mean, he went on Simi Grewal and said something like, there's a lot of woman in me. And I don't know very many actors of, his wattage at that time who were sort of, talking like this about femininity, right? And appreciating it. And I think that's really had an impact on what women expect in this sort of, mythical ideal man. But I do want to say that I think in the book, if there's one thing I want the reader to realize is all these women, it's not like they have some silly crush on a celebrity. I think they're all seeking men who will engage and reciprocate domestic labor, emotional labor, and support women's ambitions. And I think they see that in him.
I guess so too. I mean, that's so true. And there's a whole lot of debate on social media about how Shah Rukh Khan is the last superstar of Bollywood. So, not just females, but what do you think separates his fan section from, let's say, the fan section of other superstars who've existed alongside him?
So I'm not a film scholar, but what I will say is a couple of things. There's a quote in the book. This young woman says to me, she says, Salman protects us, Aamir teaches us, and Shah Rukh sees us. That's something that, and there's another woman who said, when she has a way of detecting whether a man is progressive or not, she says if he likes Shah Rukh, he may be progressive. If he likes Salman, he's bad news. If he likes Aamir, he's a bearded liberal who likes his own voice too much. I mean, it's a joke, but what I'm trying to say is I think that, each one carries a very different persona. And I've always said that, if Salman Khan and Amir Khan are considered sort of, kind of masculinity, which is about being strong, and the other one is about this idea of creative perfectionism, this idea of being the perfectionist, hard worker, which is very much sort of the best scripts and all of that, which is linked to Mr. Amir Khan. I say in the book that, Shah Rukh Khan's iconography is very much one of anxiety and vulnerability. If you look at all the characters he's always played, there's always something fragile about them. I mean, even the stalkers, the dons, the robots, all of them, right? They shed beautiful tears. I don't think anyone cries as beautifully as him on screen ever. And they have those wide open arms, and yet there's a fragility, right? There's a constant conversation with feeling unsure, insecure. And I think anyone who occupies that place of feeling unsure and insecure in their real life may connect to that, right? So I think that's really salient in what I hear fans say when I talk to them about his icon. And the other thing, though, that I do want to dismantle is, many people seem to always think that his fans are largely urban NRIs, sort of metropolitan elites. That's really not true. I mean, the one thing I realized was he has his fan bases. I mean, as I said, from low income neighborhoods all the way across to rural areas, you can encounter them everywhere. And I think what does unite all these fans is this acknowledgement in him of a very vulnerable side to all of us, right? And I think that's something that does distinguish his fan base. I also think his fan base is much more female. So as I said earlier, he's very much a woman's icon than many icons of the past.
And, before we close this, I mean, what lies ahead for you as an author?
Look, first, I was so shocked with the response to this book. I mean, it's just completely, I'm not a professional writer, as they say. It was something that was a hobby, and then it just became this real thing. I am researching another book. I'm very curious, much like how Mr. Khan's icon helped me talk to these women about their access to markets, media, and money. I want to do a book about just how Indians have fun, how much we spend our disposable income on leisure, and what that says about our economy right now. I think it's a different way to go. This book took me, as I said, I repeatedly followed a set of women for more than 10 years. The next one as well will be longitudinal. I'll be following a set of businesses and people for at least a decade. So it'll be a while before it's out.
Well, excited for that. And
thank you.
Also, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Shreeja. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.